Snow whispered against the windows of Thornfield Manor, tracing faint veins of frost across the glass, as if winter itself longed to be let inside. The fire crackled in the hearth, its light flickering across marble floors that gleamed but never felt warm. Elias Thornfield stood before it, tall and immaculate, yet hollow-eyed, a man carved from the same cold stone that built his empire. Behind him, the echo of a low growl filled the silence. Ash, the shepherd once gentle as spring rain, now paced the parlor like a restless storm. His fur, silver and black, bristled at the faintest motion. The servants kept their distance, their eyes full of pity for the creature, and fear for the man who owned him. Since the night Elias's wife had passed, Ash had become something wild, untouchable, as if grief had leapt from master to beast, choosing the only vessel strong enough to bear it. They said Elias's heart had frozen that same winter. The town whispered that he locked himself away with only his wealth and the dog who no longer knew love. But gossip, like snow, covers everything until truth lies buried beneath. What they didn't see were the nights Elias sat awake, staring at the empty chair beside the fire, hearing his wife's laughter fade again and again. Each echo carved a deeper hollow inside him, until even silence began to hurt. The breaking point came one morning in the dining hall, where the table stretched long enough to remind him how alone he was. Ash, chained at a distance, had torn apart another cushion, snarling when a servant dared to step close. Something inside Elias snapped, not with anger, but exhaustion. He rose, his voice steady but sharp as glass. $1 million, he said quietly, and the room froze. $1 million to anyone who can calm my dog. The servants exchanged glances, unsure if he was serious. But Elias wasn't a man who joked. The bet spread by evening, through the town square, the bakery, the tavern where laughter hid hunger. $1 million, to tame the beast of Thornfield Manor. Some laughed at his arrogance, others pitied his madness. Yet every soul in town felt the pull of that promise. By the third day, the manor gates had seen their share of hopefuls. Trainers, hunters, men with ropes and collars, each left bleeding, humiliated, their pride trampled by Ash's unbroken fury. Elias watched them all from his window, his face unmoved, though a strange flicker, regret perhaps, haunted his eyes when the last of them fled. Night settled heavy that week. Wind scraped across the fields, and even the moon seemed weary. In the town below, near the frozen river, a small figure scavenged through bins behind the bakery. Her name was Leora Wynne, a name no one used because no one had asked. She was the kind of child people looked past, as if she were made of mist and hunger. Her coat was too thin, her shoes split at the seams, but her eyes held a quiet defiance that even winter could not erase. She fed the crumbs she found to a stray cat, murmuring softly, her breath curling like ghostly ribbons in the air. "There you go," she said. "Everyone deserves to eat." The cat purred, and for a fleeting moment she smiled. When the church bells tolled midnight, she followed the sound up the hill toward Thornfield's gates, drawn by the flicker of light and the echo of distant barking. Jonas Hale, the stable master, found her there at dawn, huddled near the stone wall, half asleep, snow clinging to her lashes. "Girl," he said gently, wrapping his coat around her shoulders. "You'll freeze out here." She blinked up at him, lips pale, and offered a smile too soft for her age. "I heard the dog crying," she whispered. "I wanted to tell him he's not alone." Jonas frowned, unsure what to make of her words, but something in her tone, innocent, sorrowful, held him still. He brought her inside, against his better judgment. The warmth of the kitchen made her tremble. Mara Quinn, the housekeeper, crossed her arms and muttered, "Stray children bring stray troubles." Leora only lowered her head, murmuring a thank you as Jonas handed her a cup of broth. From the hallway, Elias paused, watching the scene unfold. The girl looked no older than 10, maybe 12. Her hair tangled, her fingers red from cold. She didn't belong here, not in his world of crystal and stone. "Who is she?" he asked. Mara's answer was sharp, disapproving. "A beggar, sir. Found outside the walls." Elias studied the child. Her eyes lifted to his for a brief second, and in that gaze he saw something unsettling. A reflection of the same grief he wore, only quieter, unspoken. "Let her eat," he said finally. "Then send her away before nightfall." But fate, as it often does, ignored his command. That afternoon, while snow began to fall again, Leora wandered the corridor that led to the courtyard. She heard the growl before she saw him. Ash, pacing behind the iron bars of the kennel, eyes burning like embers. The staff warned her away, but she only stood there, still as snowfall. "You miss her too, don't you?" she said softly. The dog froze. A low whine trembled from his throat, Not anger, but something like confusion. She sank to her knees, speaking in whispers, voice no louder than the wind. It hurts when someone leaves, but you're still here. That means something. Jonas, watching from the stables, held his breath. Ash's growl faded to silence. The animal sat, ears low, gaze locked on the girl as if hearing language for the first time. Leora reached through the bars and placed her palm in the cold space between them. Ash sniffed, then pressed his nose to her fingers. The world seemed to still. Even the snow paused in its fall. Jonas turned, racing inside to tell Elias what he'd seen. Within minutes, the billionaire was at the window overlooking the courtyard. His breath fogged the glass as he saw his untamable dog quiet at the feet of a child. Something in his chest twisted, a feeling both fragile and frightening. Hope. By evening, the news had spread like a fever. "The beggar girl touched the beast," Mara whispered to the maids. "She's either blessed or cursed." The town gossips carried it further. Stories of miracles, witchcraft, divine mercy. Each version grew wilder than the last. When Elias summoned her to his study that night, Leora stood barefoot before the fire, wrapped in a blanket Jonas had found. Ash sat outside the door, whining softly. Elias studied her with that same cold precision he gave his business rivals. "You do not fear him?" he asked. She shook her head. "He's not angry. Just lonely. You think loneliness makes beasts of us all?" he said, half mocking, half curious. She looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Only if we pretend we're not hurting." Elias turned away, hiding the tremor in his voice. "You understand pain too well for your age." "I understand hunger," she said simply, "and the sound people make when they cry at night." The fire crackled between them, casting gold light across her tired face. For the first time in years, Elias felt the weight of his fortune pressing against his heart instead of lifting it. "You know of my wager," he said at last. $1 million to calm him. Do you seek it?" Leora's head shook. "I don't want money, just warmth for tonight." Her answer left him wordless. Outside, the wind rose and fell like a sigh. He gestured to Mara. "Prepare a room in the west wing." Mara's disapproval burned, but she obeyed. As Leora turned to leave, Elias spoke again, his voice lower, almost kind. "If you fail him, if the beast turns, this place will close to you forever." Leora nodded, her expression steady, fearless. "Then I'll do my best not to fail." Later that night, when the manor slept, Elias stood at his window again. Snow spiraled through the lamplight, and near the kennel he saw her, a small figure sitting cross-legged beside Ash, humming to him through the bars. The dog lay down, head resting near her knees. The sight unsettled him in ways he couldn't name. It was as if grief itself had found its mirror and begun to thaw. He stayed there long after the fire died, long after his breath had fogged the glass to white. Down below, the girl kept humming, a tune that sounded like remembrance. The dog slept soundly for the first time in months. When dawn came, the servants found them both still there, blanketed in pale light, child and creature, side by side in the snow. Elias did not yet know it, but that was the first night peace had returned to Thornfield. Days unfolded like the slow turning of pages, each marked by the quiet rhythm of breath, of snow, of healing. The manor that had long echoed with silence now carried a different kind of stillness, one that hummed softly with life. Leora moved through its corridors without fear, her footsteps barely audible on the marble floors. Where others tiptoed, she walked as though she belonged, and perhaps in some quiet way, she already did. Ash followed her everywhere, his once violent eyes now tempered with calm. His loyalty renewed through the smallest gestures, a hand brushing his fur, a whispered tune, a piece of bread shared under the frost-painted window. Elias watched her from the periphery of his grief. He would see her kneeling by the hearth, drying the dog's paws, her expression peaceful in a way that unsettled him. For years, he had lived in the company of ghosts, his wealth a fortress built to keep the world out. Yet this frail child, with her tangled hair and threadbare coat, had walked through those gates as though they were air. What she brought into his home was not noise or disorder, but a presence. A quiet that did not accuse him of his solitude, but softened it. At breakfast, he began to linger longer at the table. He would ask, in tones meant to sound indifferent, whether Ash had eaten, whether the girl required new clothes. His questions were always brief, his eyes fixed on the fire, yet Leora's soft nods and murmured "thank yous" seemed to fill the room with something warmer than the flames. Mara noticed it first. "She's bewitching him," she whispered to Jonas one morning. "The child's not natural. No one calms that man, not even his wife when she lived." Jonas, polishing a saddle, only shook his head. Not magic, he said quietly, just kindness. Outside, winter deepened. Frost wrapped the trees in silver, and the lake behind the manor froze solid enough to mirror the sky. The town's gossip never ceased. Stories of the beggar girl who'd tamed the Thornfield beast grew with every telling. Some said she was a saint, others that she'd sold her soul. Leora heard the whispers when she ventured into the market for bread. But she never defended herself. Words, she had learned, were lighter than truth and far less lasting. Elias, though he pretended not to care for rumor, felt the weight of it pressing against his pride. Still, he found himself seeking her company more often. Sometimes, in the evenings, they would sit in the parlor, the firelight bending gently between them. Ash would lie at her feet, eyes half closed, his tail twitching with dreamlike ease. Leora would hum, a melody without beginning or end, and Elias would find himself remembering the sound of his wife's piano, the way her music had once made winter feel less cruel. "Tell me," he said one night, his voice rough from disuse. "How does a child learn such patience?" She looked up from the flames. "Patience isn't learned," she said simply. "It's what's left when there's no other choice." Her words struck him like a bell. Clear, resonant, undeniable. He wanted to ask what she meant, but something in her expression told him he already knew. There are stories written in silence that words could only ruin. When a storm rolled in one evening, the world outside vanished into white. Snow piled high against the windows, the wind howling through the chimneys like a lament. The power flickered, and in that darkness, Elias found himself speaking of things long buried. He told her about the night his wife died, how Ash had howled beside her bed until morning, how he had hated the sound because it told the truth he could not face. Leora listened without interruption, her small hands wrapped around a cup of tea. When he finished, she said, "He wasn't howling for her death. He was calling her home. Dogs do that when they can't bear goodbye." The simplicity of it unraveled something inside him. He had spent years turning his grief into marble, cold and unbreakable. Now, in the quiet presence of a girl who owned nothing, the stone began to crack. He felt the weight of tears he hadn't allowed himself to shed, not even at the funeral. "Home," he repeated, the word trembling on his lips. She nodded. "Sometimes home isn't a place you live. It's a thing you remember how to love." After that night, the manor changed. The servants smiled more. Jonas lit fires before anyone asked. Even Mara, who muttered her suspicions under her breath, found herself leaving warm bread by Leora's door. Ash barked less and slept more. The air, once heavy with sorrow, began to taste of something new. Something like hope. But peace, fragile as glass, rarely survives gossip. By mid-January, the town had decided the girl's presence was unnatural. Men who had failed to tame the dog muttered about trickery. When Mara carried these rumors to Elias, perhaps out of fear, perhaps jealousy, his old pride flared. "They say she's deceived you," Mara whispered, "that she feeds the dog some potion, or that she's trained it in secret." Elias tried to laugh, but the sound broke before it left his throat. The idea was absurd, and yet the seed of doubt had already taken root. That night, when Leora came to the parlor with Ash padding behind her, Elias did not greet her. His voice was cold, formal. "You've done what no one could," he said, pacing before the fire. "And yet, the town speaks of tricks. Tell me, girl, should I believe them?" She blinked, uncertain whether he was testing her. "You can believe what you need to," she said softly. But I didn't calm him. He just stopped being alone. Her calmness unsettled him more than denial would have. "You think I'm a fool?" he demanded. "You think I wanted your pity?" His anger wasn't truly for her. It was for himself, for the shame of needing something pure in a world he'd spent years corrupting with gold and grief. She took a step back, her small voice trembling now. "You asked for peace," she said, "not proof." The words hung in the air, delicate and devastating. She turned, wrapping her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Thank you for the warmth," she whispered, "but I should go now." Before he could answer, she was gone, her footsteps fading down the corridor. Out into the storm that raged beyond the gates, Elias stood frozen. The fire hissed, collapsing into embers. Outside, Ash began to bark, a desperate keening sound that carried through the manor's hollow halls. By the time Elias reached the courtyard, both girl and dog had vanished into the blizzard. He searched through the night, his lantern casting a dim halo in the white chaos. The storm swallowed sound, direction, reason. Only Ash's distant howls guided him forward. He followed the trail until his lungs burned, until his knees buckled in the snow. At last, beneath an ancient oak bowed with frost, he saw her, Leora, curled against the roots, her body still, Ash lying beside her with his muzzle pressed to her arm. "Leora!" His voice cracked, carried away by the wind. He dropped to his knees, lifting her into his arms. Her skin was cold, her breath faint but present. The scarf around her neck, the one that had belonged to his late wife, fluttered weakly in the storm's breath. He pulled her close, whispering through tears he no longer cared to hide. "You've already won, child. You've already won," Ash barked once, a sound of recognition, then leaned against Elias's side as if urging him to move. They returned to the manor, the three of them, man, dog, and girl, each leaving a trail of thawing footprints behind. Servants rushed to help when they arrived, but Elias refused to let go of her hand. He sat beside her bed for hours, whispering words he didn't know he remembered how to speak. Prayers, promises, apologies. When morning came, sunlight filtered through the frost, turning the walls to gold. Leora stirred, her lips parting with a faint sigh. Her eyes opened slowly, searching, and found his. "You came," she whispered. He smiled, weary but alive in a way he hadn't been in years. "You led me back." Days passed and strength returned to her fragile frame. Elias, changed beyond recognition, declared her the keeper of Thornfield's stables, her first true home. The news rippled through town, silencing rumor with awe. Even Mara, when she brought breakfast to the girls' room, could not bring herself to speak ill of her anymore. Ash never left her side. In the evenings, Elias would join them by the fire, the warmth wrapping around them like forgiveness. There was no talk of the wager anymore, no mention of gold or pride. Only the gentle, shared silence of those who had found their way back to one another. Outside, winter began to break. Snow melted from the eaves, revealing earth beneath, tender and waiting. Elias often found himself watching the sunrise beside her, the light turning her hair to amber. "You've given me back my peace," he said one morning. Leora smiled faintly, her gaze lost in the horizon. "You always had it," she said. "You just forgot where you buried it." When night fell again, the manor glowed softly in the moonlight. Ash slept at the hearth, his breathing slow, content. Leora hummed her winter song, and Elias closed his eyes, hearing not just music, but memory. His wife's laughter, the warmth of life returning. The story could have ended there, in that fragile serenity. Yet the wind outside carried the feeling that this was only the beginning of something greater. The quiet after the storm that teaches the heart how to love again. And if anyone listening to this whispered tale should find themselves lost in their own cold season, let them remember this. Peace does not arrive like thunder. It comes softly, on small feet, through open gates, wearing the face of kindness. If this story warmed your heart, stay with us, for there are more whispered tales waiting in the hush of winter nights. Subscribe, and let the next story find you where silence once lived.